The peaceful suburban street of Maple Lane had never seen a crime worse than stolen newspapers. Tree-lined sidewalks, manicured lawns, and the gentle hum of sprinkler systems created the perfect picture of American dream living. Dr. Sarah Thompson often remarked to her husband how lucky they were to raise their 3-year-old daughter Lily in such a safe neighborhood. That sense of security would be shattered forever on a humid Tuesday night in July. At exactly 2:47 a.m., little Lily Thompson's eyes fluttered open in her pink princess-themed bedroom. Something had disturbed her sleep, a sound that didn't belong. In her world of stuffed animals and fairy tale books, the nightlight cast gentle shadows of butterflies on her walls, but tonight, those familiar shapes seemed different, more menacing. She clutched her favorite stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts, closer to her chest as she heard her bedroom door creak slowly open. What Lily saw next would haunt her dreams for months to come. A massive shadow filled her doorway, and in the darkness, 2 glowing yellow eyes stared directly at her. They weren't human eyes. They were too low to the ground, too wild, too predatory. A low, rumbling growl emanated from the creature, sending chills down the little girl's spine. Her 3-year-old mind couldn't process what she was seeing, but every instinct screamed danger. Terrified beyond words, Lily rolled off her toddler bed and scrambled underneath it, pulling Mr. Peanuts with her. The hardwood floor was cold against her pink pajamas as she pressed herself as far back as possible, making herself as small as she could. Through the gap between her bed and the floor, she could see massive paws black, with curved claws padding silently across her bedroom carpet. Heavy boots thundered through the house, shaking the very foundations of her safe world. Glass exploded. Somewhere downstairs, the sound of her mother's antique vase crashing to the floor. Then came the voices, rough and demanding, shouting orders she couldn't understand. Her parents' bedroom door slammed open down the hall, followed by her mother's terrified scream. "Please, don't hurt us." Her father's voice pleaded. Dr. Michael Thompson, usually so calm and confident in his medical practice, sounded small and frightened. "We'll give you whatever you want." But what happened next was the sound that would echo in Lily's mind forever vicious. Aggressive barking that seemed to come from the depths of hell itself. The creature with the yellow eyes was no ordinary dog. Its bark was deep, threatening, designed to paralyze victims with fear. Through her terror, Lily heard her father cry out in pain, followed by her mother's hysterical sobbing. "Shut up, or the dog gets worse," a harsh male voice commanded. Heavy footsteps moved systematically through the house, the master bedroom, her father's study, the living room where her toys were scattered. Drawers were yanked open, furniture overturned, and her mother's jewelry box, the one that played Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, crashed to the floor with a musical dying breath. From her hiding place, Lily could hear the intruders communicating. In low, urgent whispers. "Check the safe," one said. "The kid's room," another added ominously. Terror seized her tiny heart. They were coming back for her. The footsteps approached her room again, and the yellow eyes reappeared in her doorway. The creature sniffed the air, its wet nose making horrible snuffling sounds as it searched for her scent. Lily held her breath, squeezing Mr. Peanut so tightly that his stuffing was compressed into a hard ball. She closed her eyes and wished desperately to disappear, to wake up from this nightmare, to have her daddy come save her. Minutes felt like hours. The sounds of destruction continued throughout the house, electronics being unplugged, artwork torn from walls, and her parents' muffled cries, punctuated by the occasional threatening bark from the monster with yellow eyes. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the voices grew distant. "Let's go," someone called out. "We got what we came for." The heavy footsteps retreated, followed by the click-click of claws on hardwood floors. A door slammed. Car engines roared to life and disappeared into the night, leaving behind an eerie silence that was somehow more terrifying than the chaos. Lily remained frozen under her bed for another 20 minutes, afraid that the monsters might return. Only when she heard her mother's weak voice calling her name did she finally emerge from her hiding place. She found her parents in the hallway, her father with a bloody bandage around his arm, where the beast had bitten him, her mother's face streaked with tears, and her nightgown torn. "Oh, sweetheart," her mother sobbed, scooping Lily into her arms. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" But Lily couldn't speak. The words were trapped somewhere deep inside, locked away by trauma and terror. She could only stare with wide, haunted eyes at the destruction around her. Her safe world, the one with butterfly nightlights and bedtime. Stories had been invaded by monsters with yellow eyes and voices that promised violence. When police arrived 20 minutes later, called by a neighbor who had heard the screaming, they found a family forever changed. The Thompson home looked like a war zone, $50,000 worth of jewelry and electronics stolen, furniture destroyed, and a sense of security that could never be fully repaired. But the most heartbreaking discovery was little Lily still hiding under her bed when Officer Martinez found her, unable to speak a single word. The monsters had stolen more than just material possessions. They had taken away a little girl's voice, leaving behind only the memory of glowing yellow eyes and the echo of a nightmare that would haunt her dreams for months to come. The investigation was just beginning, but already Detective Santos knew this case would be unlike any other. The only witness to this brutal home invasion was a 3-year-old girl who could no longer speak, and somewhere in the darkness of her traumatized mind lay the key to catching the monsters who had shattered her world. Detective Maria Santos had been working homicide and major crimes for 15 years, but she'd never encountered a case quite like this one. As she sat in her cramped office at the Phoenix Metropolitan Police Department, surrounded by crime scene, photos and evidence bags, she felt the familiar weight of frustration that came with hitting dead ends. The Thompson home invasion wasn't just another burglary, it was a puzzle with missing pieces, and the most crucial piece was locked inside the traumatized mind of a 3-year-old girl. The crime scene had yielded frustratingly little. The perpetrators were professionals. They'd worn gloves, masks, and shoe covers that left no distinguishable prints. The only DNA found belonged to the family themselves, and even the blood from Dr. Thompson's dog bite had been carefully cleaned up. It was as if ghosts had invaded the Thompson home, taken what they wanted, and vanished without a trace. Santos spread the photographs across her desk for the 100th time, studying every detail with fresh eyes. The living room showed clear. Signs of systematic searching, drawers opened methodically, cushions lifted and replaced, electronics disconnected with care rather than ripped out in haste. This wasn't random vandalism or a drug-fueled rampage. These criminals knew exactly what they were looking for and where to find it. "Any luck with the neighborhood canvas?" Detective Ray Morrison asked, appearing in her doorway with a steaming cup of coffee and a discouraged expression. "Nothing useful," Santos replied, rubbing her tired eyes. Mrs. Chun across the street heard some barking around 3 a.m., but thought it was the Johnsons' German Shepherd having another nightmare. The college students next door were passed out drunk and didn't hear anything. The security cameras on Elm Street were conveniently malfunctioning that night. Probably not a coincidence. Morrison settled into the chair across from her desk, his 20-year veteran's intuition clearly troubled. What about the family? Any enemies? Financial problems? Insurance issues? "Clean as a whistle," Santos said, flipping through her notes. "Dr. Michael Thompson is a respected cardiologist at Phoenix General. Dr. Sarah Thompson runs a pediatric practice that serves half the families in Scottsdale. No gambling debts, no affairs, no malpractice lawsuits, no disgruntled patients. Their biggest controversy was a parking dispute with their neighbor 2 years ago. The real heartbreak of the case wasn't the lack of evidence, it was watching what the trauma had done to little Lily Thompson. Santos had visited the family 3 times since the break-in, hoping the child might recover enough memory to provide some clue, but each visit was more devastating than the last. The once chatty toddler who had delighted in showing visitors. Her toy collection now communicated only through nods and head shakes. She clung to her stuffed elephant like a lifeline and would burst into tears at unexpected sounds. Sleep was nearly impossible. She would wake up screaming about yellow monsters, but couldn't elaborate beyond pointing and crying. The worst part, Dr. Sarah Thompson had confided during Santos' last visit, is that we can see her trying to tell us something. She'll start to speak, get this look of concentration, and then just ... shut down. It's like watching her fight. A battle in her own mind. The drawings were what haunted Santos the most. Child psychologist Dr. Amanda Reed had shown her Lily's artwork from their therapy sessions, page after page of the same image, rendered in thick crayon strokes. Yellow. Circles. Always yellow circles, sometimes with jagged lines around them like rays of light, sometimes floating in fields of black scribbles that Dr. Reed interpreted as fear and darkness. She draws them obsessively, Dr. Reed had explained during their consultation. When I ask her what they are, she points to her eyes and shakes her head frantically. It's clearly connected to her trauma, but 3-year-olds don't have the vocabulary to process what they've experienced. Her mind is trying to communicate through the only medium it can access, but we're missing the translation. Santos had consulted with art therapists, child development experts, even a psychiatrist who specialized in trauma-induced selective mutism. Everyone agreed that Lily had witnessed something significant, but unlocking that memory without causing further psychological damage was proving impossible. The case was further complicated by the fact that this wasn't an isolated incident. Over the past 6 months, there had been 3 similar home invasions in upscale Phoenix neighborhoods. Each followed the same pattern. Professional entry, systematic. Searching, high-value items stolen, no useful evidence left behind. But the Thompson case was the first where there had been a witness, even one who couldn't speak. Captain Rodriguez had made it clear that the department was under pressure. The mayor's office is getting calls from every wealthy neighborhood in the city, he told Santos that morning. People are installing security systems, hiring private guards, some are even talking about moving. We need to catch these guys before panic sets in. But how do you catch ghosts? Santos stared at the evidence board she'd created, with photos connected by red string like something from a crime thriller. 2 suspects based on witness descriptions from other scenes. One tall, one medium build, both wearing dark clothing and masks. A possible vehicle, a dark SUV, seen in the vicinity of 2 break-ins, but no license plate number. And somewhere, in this puzzle, a detail that had traumatized a 3-year-old so severely that she'd lost the ability to speak. A phone rang, startling Santos from her thoughts. Detective Santos, this is Dr. Reed. I think you need to see something. Lily drew a new picture today, and it's single quotes S... different. She added something to the yellow circles. Can you come to my office? Santos was already reaching for her keys. After 2 weeks of dead ends and sleepless nights, any new development felt like a lifeline. As she drove through the afternoon Phoenix, heat toward Dr. Reed's office, she couldn't shake the feeling that a 3-year-old girl held the key to solving not just this case, but potentially stopping a crime spree that had an entire city living in fear. The question was, how do you unlock the secrets trapped in a traumatized child's mind without destroying what little piece she had left? District Attorney James Mitchell stared at the clock on his office wall with growing dread. 3:47 p.m. In less than 36 hours, Judge Patricia Harrison would make a decision that could set two dangerous criminals free. The preliminary hearing for Marcus Webb and Tony Rivera was scheduled for Thursday morning, and unless the prosecution could present compelling evidence by then, the charges would be dismissed and the suspects would walk away as free men. Mitchell's corner office on the 15th floor of the Maricopa County Attorney's Building usually felt like a command center for justice. But today, it felt more like a war room facing inevitable defeat. The walls were covered with crime scene photos, suspect mugshots, and a detailed timeline that highlighted one glaring problem. They had circumstantial evidence at best, and their only witness was a traumatized 3-year-old who hadn't spoken. In 3 weeks. "Tell me we have something new," Mitchell said as his team filed into the conference room. Assistant District Attorney Elena Vasquez shook her head grimly, followed by Detective Santos and FBI profiler Dr. Kevin Walsh, who had been brought in to analyze the crime patterns. "The security footage from the Henderson residence is our best," Lead Vasquez reported, clicking through images on the large monitor. "We can clearly see two figures approaching the house at 2:15 a.m., but the image quality is too poor for facial identification. There's also this." She paused the video on a frame that showed something low to the ground, moving between the suspects. Movement analysis suggests a large dog, approximately 80 to 100 pounds. But again, we can't make a positive identification. Dr. Walsh leaned forward, studying the grainy footage intently. The behavioral patterns are consistent across all four. Home invasions. These aren't random crimes of opportunity. Someone is specifically targeting affluent families with detailed advance planning. They know the layouts, the security systems, the family schedules. This suggests extensive surveillance and possibly inside information. Inside information. From where? Mitchell asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. Could be anyone, Santos replied. Cleaning services, security companies, home repair contractors, even real estate agents who've shown the houses. We're talking about a potential network, not just two guys with a dog. Mitchell felt his stomach tighten. A criminal network would be infinitely harder to prosecute, especially with their current lack of evidence. He turned to the photographs of Marcus Webb and Tony Rivera spread across the table. Both men had extensive criminal histories: burglary, assault, drug trafficking, but their lawyers, the expensive kind that guilty wealthy criminals hire, had successfully argued that past convictions didn't prove current guilt. What about their alibis? He asked, though he already knew this was another dead end. Solid, Vasquez admitted reluctantly. Webb claims he was at his girlfriend's apartment in Tempe. She swears he never left. Rivera says he was working a night shift at his cousin's auto repair shop. The cousin backs him up, and there's even a time-stamped security video showing someone who looks like Rivera at the shop. Of course, the video quality conveniently makes positive identification impossible. The breakthrough came at 4:23 p.m., just as Mitchell was beginning to draft his resignation letter. His phone buzzed with a text from Detective Santos. Fourth, family hit, active crime scene. This time, they made a mistake. Mitchell's heart raced as he speed-dialed Santos. What happened? The Brennan family on the Camelback Mountain, Santos said, her voice tight with controlled excitement. Same memo, but this time a neighbor's new security system caught everything in high definition. We've got clear footage of the suspects and the dog. Even better, one of them dropped something during the escape. Within 20 minutes, Mitchell was standing in the Brennan family's destroyed living room, watching the most important evidence video of his career. The high-resolution footage showed two masked figures systematically ransacking the house while a massive Rottweiler stood guard. But it was the final 30 seconds that made Mitchell's pulse quicken. As the suspects fled, one of them clearly identifiable as Marcus Webb, despite the mask, due to his distinctive limp from an old gunshot wound, stumbled over the family's garden hose. A small object flew from his pocket and landed in the flower bed. The footage showed him searching frantically for several seconds before his partner called him away. "What did he drop?" Mitchell asked, though Santos was already holding up an evidence bag containing a silver dog tag. "Brutus," Santos read from the tag. "If found, call Marcus Webb," followed by a phone number. The same phone number listed in Webb's criminal file. Mitchell felt the first surge of real hope he'd experienced in weeks. This is it. This connects Webb directly to the crime scene. "Gets better," Santos continued. "The dog attacked Mr. Brennan when he tried to protect his daughter. We've got DNA from saliva on the victim's shirt and bite pattern analysis from the wound photos. If we can find this dog, we can match the bite to the Thompson case," Mitchell finished, his mind racing with possibilities. Dr. Thompson had a dog bite on his arm. If it's the same animal. But even as excitement built, Mitchell knew they were facing a new problem. Webb and Rivera had been arrested that morning, but they weren't talking, and Webb's dog was nowhere to be found. Without the animal, they still couldn't make the connection to all four crimes stick in court. Dr. Amanda Reed arrived at the prosecutor's office at 6:30 p.m., bringing with her the most heartbreaking piece of evidence yet, Lily Thompson's latest drawings. Unlike her previous obsessive yellow circles, this drawing showed something new: jagged teeth surrounding the yellow eyes, and what looked unmistakably like a collar around a thick neck. She drew this right after hearing about another family being hurt, Dr. Reed explained to the assembled team. "I think she's trying to tell us that the monster that terrorized her family has hurt other people too. But Jim, she's getting worse. The news reports about the Brennan family have triggered massive regression. She's stopped eating, stopped sleeping. Her parents are considering taking her out of state until this is over." Mitchell stared at the child's drawing and felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. They had 24 hours to build a case strong enough to convince Judge Harrison to proceed to trial. Without Lily's testimony, they had circumstantial evidence and a dog tag. With her testimony, they might have enough to put two dangerous criminals away for decades. But asking a traumatized 3-year-old to testify in court wasn't just legally complicated, it was potentially devastating to the child's psychological recovery. As night fell over Phoenix, Mitchell made the decision that would define his career. They were going to trial with whatever evidence they had, and somehow they were going to find a way to let little Lily Thompson tell her story without destroying what remained of her childhood innocence. The race against time had become a race to save both the city's sense of security and a little girl's future. The emergency meeting in Judge Patricia Harrison's chambers at 7:30 a.m. Thursday morning was unlike anything the veteran jurist had experienced in her 23 years on the bench. Present were District Attorney James Mitchell, defense attorney Victoria Cross, child psychologist Dr. Amanda Reed, and Detective Santos, all gathered to discuss what Cross had mockingly called the most desperate legal maneuver in Arizona history. Judge Harrison, known for her no-nonsense approach and unwavering adherence to proper courtroom procedure, listened with growing amazement as Dr. Reed explained her unprecedented proposal. "Your Honor, Lily Thompson has been making significant progress in her therapy sessions, but only when she's in the presence of specially trained therapy animals," Dr. Reed began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was suggesting. "Yesterday, we had a breakthrough when Officer Rick Thompson brought his retired police dog, Ranger, to one of our sessions. For the first time since the attack, Lily spoke just 2 words, but it was communication. Victoria Cross, the high-priced defense attorney representing Marcus Webb and Tony Rivera, sat with her arms crossed and an expression of barely contained contempt. At 45, she had built her reputation defending wealthy criminals, and had never lost a case involving circumstantial evidence. Her clients paid her handsomely to exploit every weakness in the prosecution's case, and this situation was ripe with opportunities. Your Honor, Cross interjected with practiced disdain, the prosecution is asking this court to turn legal proceedings into a circus. They want to bring a dog into your courtroom because their entire case rests on the hoped-for testimony of a traumatized child who hasn't spoken coherently in a month. This isn't therapy. It's desperation masquerading as innovation. Mitchell leaned forward, his jaw tight with determination. Your Honor, we have 4 families terrorized, 2 suspects with clear connections to the crimes and physical evidence, linking them to at least one break-in. The only reason we're having this discussion is because our primary witness is a 3-year-old victim of severe trauma. We're not asking for special treatment. We're asking for accommodation that allows a victim to testify. Dr. Reed opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder of research documents. Your Honor, I've consulted with colleagues across the country about this situation. There's precedent for allowing comfort animals in courtrooms, particularly in cases involving child witnesses. The therapeutic benefit is well documented, and we have evidence that Lily responds specifically to the presence of trained dogs. Judge Harrison examined the studies Dr. Reed had provided, her expression thoughtful. The legal precedents were limited, but legitimate courts in California, New York, and Florida had allowed therapy animals during testimony from child witnesses, particularly in abuse cases. But those had involved dogs specifically trained as courtroom companions, not active-duty police, K-9 South. Dr. Reed, the judge said carefully, you mentioned Officer Thompson's dog had an effect on the child. Can you elaborate on what happened during that session? Dr. Reed's eyes brightened with the memory. Ranger is a 12-year-old golden retriever who spent 8 years with the Phoenix PD before retiring due to arthritis. He's been retrained as a therapy animal and has worked with traumatized children before. When Officer Thompson brought him to our session, Lily's entire demeanor changed. She approached the dog voluntarily, which was the first time she'd initiated contact with anyone outside her immediate family since the attack. And she spoke? Judge Harrison asked. Yes, Your Honor. She looked at Ranger and said, nice doggy. Then she turned to me and said, not scary. It may not sound like much, but for Lily, it was tremendous progress. The presence of a calm, gentle dog seemed to help her differentiate between her traumatic memories and safe reality. Cross rolled her eyes dramatically. Your Honor, even if we accept this therapy session as legitimate, there's no guarantee. The child will speak in court. The prosecution is asking you to approve an experimental procedure with no assurance of results. Moreover, there's no way to predict what a 3-year-old might say. Child testimony is notoriously unreliable. Their memories are easily influenced, their vocabulary limited, and their understanding of truth versus imagination is undeveloped. Detective Santos, who had remained silent until now, spoke up with quiet intensity. Your Honor, I've been investigating these crimes for 6 months. 4 families have been terrorized, and we have evidence that suggests these suspects are part of a larger criminal network. Lily Thompson is the only witness who saw their faces, heard their voices, and experienced their methods firsthand. If we don't find a way for her to communicate what she knows, these men will walk free and more families will suffer. The room fell silent as Judge Harrison weighed the competing arguments. Through her chamber's windows, she could see the courthouse steps where reporters had gathered, waiting for news about what the media had dubbed the phantom burglar case. The public pressure was immense, but judicial decisions couldn't be based on popular opinion. Dr. Reed, Judge Harrison said finally, if I were to allow this accommodation, what specific protocols would you recommend? Dr. Reed had clearly anticipated this question. The dog would need to be a certified therapy animal, not an active police K-9. The handler should be someone Lily has met before and feels comfortable with. The animal would remain calm and stationary during testimony, serving only as a comfort presence. We'd also recommend limiting the number of people in the courtroom to reduce anxiety for the child. Cross stood abruptly, her voice rising with indignation. Your Honor, this is unprecedented and potentially prejudicial. The jury will see a child with a therapy dog and automatically assume she needs protection from my clients. It creates sympathy that has nothing to do with the facts of the case. Furthermore, we have no idea what this child might say. She could accuse anyone of anything, and the presence of the dog will lend false credibility to whatever story she tells. Mitchell responded quickly. Your Honor, the defense is essentially arguing that we should deny a traumatized victim the accommodation. She needs to testify because her testimony might be harmful to their clients. The therapy dog doesn't change the facts. It simply allows the witness to communicate those facts. Judge Harrison spent several long minutes reviewing the legal precedents Dr. Reed had provided, occasionally glancing up at the assembled attorneys with an expression that revealed nothing of her internal deliberation. Finally, she set down the documents and looked directly at each person in the room. This court has an obligation to seek justice while protecting the welfare of all parties, especially child witnesses, she began slowly. Dr. Reed, I'm approving your request with strict conditions. The therapy animal must be certified, must remain under handler control at all times, and must not interact with the jury. The child's testimony will be limited to questions about what she observed, not interpretations or conclusions. And Ms. Cross, you will have full opportunity to cross-examine, though I expect appropriate sensitivity given the witness's age. Cross's face flushed with anger, but she maintained professional composure. Your Honor, we object to these proceedings and reserve the right to appeal any conviction based on this irregular testimony. Noted, Judge Harrison replied curtly. Dr. Reed, how soon can you prepare the child for testimony? With the right therapy animal present, possibly as early as tomorrow, Your Honor, but I must stress that we cannot guarantee the child will speak, even with accommodations. As the meeting concluded, Mitchell felt cautiously optimistic for the first time in weeks. They had secured permission for their unconventional approach, but now came the greater challenge: finding a way to help a traumatized 3-year-old girl. Find the courage to face her nightmares in a room full of strangers, and tell the truth that could put monsters away forever. The atmosphere in Courtroom 4B of the Maricopa County Superior Court was electric with anticipation as the most unusual trial in the county's history was about to begin. By 8:30 a.m., every seat in the gallery was filled with reporters, legal observers, and members of the Phoenix community who had been following the case obsessively. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished wood floors where history was about to be made. Judge Patricia Harrison entered with her characteristic stern dignity, and the packed courtroom rose in unison. At 62, she commanded respect through decades of fair but unwavering judicial decisions. Today, however, even her composed demeanor couldn't hide the weight of the unprecedented situation she was about to oversee. Be seated, Judge Harrison announced, her voice carrying clearly across the silent courtroom. This court is now in session in the matter of the state of Arizona versus Marcus Webb and Tony Rivera. In the front row of the gallery, Dr. Michael and Sarah Thompson sat with their daughter Lily between them, the little girl clutching her beloved stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts, with white-knuckled determination. She wore a yellow sundress that her mother had chosen specifically because yellow was Lily's favorite color, though none of them could have predicted how significant that color choice would become. Lily's wide brown eyes darted nervously around the imposing courtroom, taking in the formal atmosphere that felt more like a cathedral than the colorful therapy rooms where she'd been working with Dr. Reed. The high ceilings, dark wood paneling, and rows of serious-faced strangers created an environment that seemed designed to intimidate even adults, let alone a traumatized 3-year-old. Near the back of the courtroom, Officer Rick Thompson waited patiently with Zeus, his German Shepherd canine partner. The massive black and tan dog sat at perfect attention, his intelligent amber eyes alert but calm. Zeus was a 7-year veteran of the Phoenix Police Department, trained in narcotics detection and suspect apprehension, but today his role would be entirely different. Dr. Reed had spent 2 hours the previous evening working with Zeus and his handler, ensuring the dog would remain perfectly still and non-threatening during the proceedings. At the defense table, Marcus Webb and Tony Rivera sat in their best suits, looking every inch the respectable citizens their expensive lawyers had coached them to portray. Webb, 34, was a muscular man with cold gray eyes and a jagged scar along his left jaw from a knife fight in prison. Despite his attempts to appear reformed, there was something predatory in the way he surveyed the courtroom, as if calculating escape routes or identifying potential threats. Rivera, younger at 28, seemed more nervous, frequently whispering to his attorney and casting worried glances toward the gallery where victims' family members sat. He had been the one to crack under initial interrogation, providing details that had led police to several pieces of evidence, though he had since recanted his statements and claimed they were coerced. Defense attorney Victoria Cross cut an impressive figure in her tailored black suit and perfectly styled silver hair. At the defense table, she projected confidence that bordered on arrogance, occasionally smiling at her clients in a way designed to suggest their innocence to any observing jurors. Her reputation for destroying prosecution cases was legendary, and she had never lost a case involving circumstantial evidence. District Attorney James Mitchell sat across the aisle at the prosecution table, flanked by Assistant District Attorney Elena Vasquez and Detective Maria Santos. Mitchell's usually immaculate appearance showed signs of the stress he'd been under. His tie was slightly askew, and there were dark circles under his eyes from countless sleepless nights preparing for this moment. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Judge Harrison addressed the 12 men and women who would decide the fate of Webb and Rivera. "You are about to witness testimony from a very young witness under highly unusual circumstances. I want to remind you that your duty is to focus on the facts presented and not be influenced by the emotional impact of the witness's age or the accommodations we have made for her testimony." Victoria Cross rose for her opening statement with the confidence of a predator who had spotted weakness in her prey. Her voice was smooth and commanding as she addressed the jury, her eyes making contact with each member as she spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you are about to see is a desperate prosecution attempting to build a case on speculation, emotion, and the unreliable testimony of a traumatized child," Cross began, her tone suggesting reasonable concern rather than callous dismissal. "The state wants you to convict 2 innocent men based on circumstantial evidence and the confused memories of a 3-year-old who has been influenced by weeks of therapy and leading questions." She paused dramatically, allowing her words to sink in before continuing. "My clients, Marcus Webb and Tony Rivera, are not angels. They have made mistakes in the past, and they have paid for those mistakes. But past errors in judgment do not make them guilty of these crimes. The prosecution has no fingerprints, no DNA evidence, no eyewitness identification from adult witnesses, and no direct physical evidence linking my clients to any of these alleged burglaries." Cross moved closer to the jury box, her voice becoming more intimate and persuasive. "What they do have is a child who has been through unspeakable trauma that no one disputes occurred, but trauma can distort memory, create false associations, and cause a young mind to connect unrelated events. The prosecution is asking you to convict based on the testimony of a witness whose cognitive development is still in its earliest stages, whose understanding of truth versus imagination is not yet fully formed. She gestured toward where Lily sat with her parents, her voice taking on a tone of manufactured sympathy. No one wants to see that little girl suffer further, but justice demands that we not allow sympathy to override the requirement for proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The state's case is built on shadows and speculation, and shadows cannot support the weight of justice. As Cross returned to her seat with obvious satisfaction, Mitchell rose for his opening statement. His approach was markedly different, less theatrical, more direct, focusing on the human cost of the crimes rather than legal technicalities. "Members of the jury," Mitchell began, his voice steady despite the pressure he felt. "4 families in our community have been terrorized by professional criminals who invaded their homes, threatened their children, and stole not just their belongings, but their sense of security. The evidence we will present shows a pattern of carefully planned attacks carried out by the defendants, attacks that culminated in the brutal assault on the Thompson family." But even as Mitchell spoke with conviction about the evidence they would present, his eyes kept drifting to little Lily Thompson, sitting silently in the front row with her stuffed elephant. The success of their entire case would ultimately depend on whether this traumatized child could find the courage to speak the words that would put her family's attackers behind bars. The courtroom showdown had begun, but the most dramatic moment was yet to come. The prosecution's case had been methodically presented over 2 grueling days. Mitchell and his team had laid out their evidence piece by piece: the forensic analysis, the crime scene photographs, the pattern of break-ins, and the dog tag that connected Marcus Webb to the Brennan family attack. But as Victoria Cross began her defense presentation on Wednesday afternoon, it was clear that circumstantial evidence alone might not be enough to convince the jury. Cross moved through her defense with surgical precision, systematically dismantling each piece of prosecution evidence. The dog tag could have been planted, she argued. The bite marks were inconclusive without the actual animal to compare. The security footage was too grainy for positive identification. Her cross-examinations of police witnesses had been brutal and effective, highlighting every gap in the investigation, every assumption made without concrete proof. "Ladies and gentlemen," Cross said as she approached the jury for what appeared to be her closing argument, "the prosecution has presented you with a compelling story, but stories are not evidence. They have shown you photographs, diagrams, and expert testimony, but they have not proven beyond a reasonable doubt that my clients committed these crimes." In the gallery, Lily Thompson sat between her parents, growing increasingly agitated as the afternoon wore on. The formal atmosphere, the raised voices during cross-examination, and the constant attention from strangers were taking their toll. She had been fidgeting with Mr. Peanuts for the past hour, occasionally whimpering softly when the attorneys' voices became particularly loud or argumentative. Dr. Amanda Reed, seated directly behind the Thompson family, watched Lily's behavior with growing concern. The child's stress levels were clearly escalating, and Reed recognized the warning signs of an impending emotional breakdown. She had recommended limiting Lily's time in the courtroom to prevent exactly this kind of psychological pressure. "The state wants you to believe that my clients are monsters," Cross continued, her voice rising with practiced indignation. "They want you to convict based on sympathy for the victims and fear of crime in our community. But justice requires more than emotion. It requires proof. And the proof simply is not there." As Cross spoke, Officer Rick Thompson waited in the hallway with Zeus, ready to bring the K-9 into the courtroom if Dr. Reed determined that Lily needed the comfort animal's presence. They had practiced this scenario multiple times. Zeus would enter quietly, lie down near the witness stand, and remain perfectly still while Lily testified. But so far, the little girl hadn't been called to testify, and it was beginning to look like she might not need to. That changed in an instant. Furthermore, Cross declared with theatrical flair, this entire case is built on the fantasy testimony of a traumatized child who cannot possibly distinguish between reality and nightmare. The prosecution would have you believe that a 3-year-old's confused memories should be the foundation for sending 2 men to prison for decades. At the mention of fantasy and confused memories, something shifted in Lily's demeanor. She stopped fidgeting and began staring intently at Victoria Cross with an expression that her mother had never seen before. Not fear, not confusion, but something that looked almost like recognition mixed with anger. The defense calls no witnesses. Your Honor, Cross announced with confident satisfaction. The prosecution has failed to meet their burden of proof, and we move for dismissal of all charges. Judge Harrison was about to call a recess when Dr. Reed made an urgent gesture from the gallery. Your Honor, she called out, rising from her seat. I believe the witness may be ready to testify now. The courtroom fell silent as all eyes turned to little Lily Thompson. The child was now standing on the bench, her face flushed with what looked like determination rather than fear. She was staring directly at the defense table, her small hands clenched into fists around her stuffed elephant. Dr. Reed, Judge Harrison said carefully, are you certain the child is prepared for this? Before Dr. Reed could answer, Lily tugged frantically on her mother's sleeve. Mama, she whispered, her voice carrying in the suddenly silent courtroom. Mama, I want to tell. Sarah Thompson looked at her daughter with amazement. These were the first coherent words Lily had spoken in public since the night of the attack. Tell what, sweetheart? About the bad man and the scary doggy, Lily said, her voice growing stronger. She pointed directly at Marcus Webb. That bad man. Victoria Cross shot to her feet immediately. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The child hasn't been sworn in, hasn't been questioned properly, and is clearly being influenced by the emotional atmosphere of the courtroom. But Judge Harrison held up her hand for silence, her experienced judicial instincts telling her that something significant was happening. Dr. Reed, please bring Officer Thompson and the therapy animal into the courtroom. We're going to proceed very carefully here. As Officer Thompson entered with Zeus, an extraordinary transformation occurred. Instead of the calm, controlled entry they had rehearsed, Zeus immediately became alert and focused on something specific in the courtroom. The German shepherd's ears went forward, his body tensed, and he began making low, almost inaudible sounds of recognition. Lily saw Zeus, and instead of the comfort they had expected her to feel, she became visibly terrified. Her face went pale, and she began shaking uncontrollably. But rather than retreating into silence, as she had for weeks, she found her voice. No, she screamed, pointing at Zeus with a trembling finger. Bad doggy, bad doggy. The courtroom erupted in confusion as Lily continued pointing and crying. Her parents tried to comfort her, but she pushed them away, her attention fixed entirely on the German shepherd. Zeus, responding to the child's distress with the instincts of a trained police dog, began to pace and whine, clearly agitated by something he sensed but couldn't act upon. Bad doggy? Lily screamed again, her voice cutting through the chaos. Then, in a moment that would be replayed in news broadcasts across the nation, she turned from Zeus and pointed directly at Marcus Webb in the defendant's chair. Bad doggy. Bad doggy. That bad man has bad doggy. The connection hit everyone in the courtroom like a lightning bolt. Lily wasn't afraid of Zeus because he was a dog. She was afraid because he reminded her of the attack dog that had been used to terrorize her family. And somehow, in her 3-year-old mind, she had made the connection between the dog and the man who controlled it. Victoria Cross was on her feet shouting objections, but her voice was drowned out by the chaos in the gallery as reporters and spectators realized what they were witnessing. Judge Harrison was banging her gavel demanding order, but nothing could. stop what had been unleashed. He hurt Daddy. Lily cried out, still pointing at Webb with remarkable accuracy, despite her emotional state. Bad doggy bit Daddy. Bad man. Bad doggy. Marcus Webb, who had maintained his composure throughout the trial, suddenly looked panicked. His careful facade was cracking as a 3-year-old girl's testimony threatened to destroy the alibi and defense strategy that had protected him. Detective Santos, sitting at the prosecution table, felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place in her mind. The yellow eyes in Lily's drawings weren't just any dog's eyes. They were the specific memory of an attack animal. The systematic nature of the crimes wasn't just professional burglary. It was intimidation through trained animal aggression. As court officers moved to restore order and Judge Harrison called for an immediate recess, one thing was crystal clear. A traumatized 3-year-old girl had just delivered the most powerful testimony of the entire trial, and the case against Marcus Webb and Tony Rivera had fundamentally changed forever. The 30-minute recess that Judge Harrison called felt like 30 hours to everyone involved. The courthouse corridors buzzed with frantic activity as reporters called their newsrooms. Lawyers huddled with their clients, and police officers coordinated with prosecutors about the explosive new developments. In the victim services room, Dr. Reed worked carefully with Lily Thompson to ensure the child understood what had just happened and felt safe continuing. District Attorney James Mitchell paced the hallway outside the courtroom, his mind racing with the implications of Lily's testimony. Detective Maria Santos was already on her phone with the K-9 unit, requesting immediate searches of every property connected to Marcus Webb. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity, but they needed concrete evidence to back up a 3-year-old's emotional outburst. "Jim, you need to see this," Santos called out, ending her phone call with visible excitement. "I just spoke with Sergeant Williams from the K-9 unit. 3 months ago, they got a complaint about illegal dog fighting on a property in Ahwatukee. Guess whose name was on the rental agreement?" Mitchell felt his pulse quicken. "Webb? Marcus Webb, using a fake name that we can now connect to his identity." The property was raided, but they found evidence of recent activity, blood stains, makeshift fighting rings, medical supplies for treating injured animals. No dogs were recovered because someone had cleared them out just hours before the raid. The implications hit Mitchell like a physical blow. He's not just using an attack dog for burglaries. He's running illegal dog fights, training animals for aggression, and using them as weapons in his crimes. Inside the defense conference room, Victoria Cross faced the worst crisis of her legal career. Her client Marcus Webb sat across from her, his calm facade completely shattered as he realized that a child's testimony had potentially destroyed his alibi and exposed his criminal enterprise. "You never told me about the dog," Cross hissed, her professional composure barely containing her fury. "You let me build an entire defense strategy without mentioning that you own a trained attack animal." Webb's scarred face was pale with sweat. It wasn't supposed to matter. The kid was mute. Nobody was supposed to connect the dots. "Well, congratulations, Marcus. Your mute witness just identified you in front of a packed courtroom and television cameras. Every jury member saw a traumatized 3-year-old point directly at you and scream about your attack dog." Tony Rivera, who had been silent throughout most of the trial, suddenly broke down completely. "I can't do this anymore, Victoria. That little girl ... got seeing her so scared. I have a daughter the same age." Cross whirled on her secondary client. "Tony, do not say another word. Anything you say now can be used against you." But Rivera was beyond legal advice. The weight of what they had done to the Thompson family, combined with watching Lily's traumatic testimony, had shattered his resolve. "We used Brutus to scare the families," he said, tears streaming down his face. "Marcus trained him to attack on command. When Dr. Thompson tried to protect his daughter, Marcus ordered Brutus to bite him. "Tony, stop talking," Cross commanded, but it was too late. "The other families too," Rivera continued, his voice breaking. "We'd send Brutus in first to terrorize them, make them too scared to fight back or call for help immediately." Marcus sighed. "Scared victims make mistakes, forget details, can't give good descriptions to police." Cross sank into her chair, realizing her case had just evaporated completely. Her clients hadn't just committed burglary, they had weaponized an attack dog to terrorize families with children. When court reconvened, the atmosphere was entirely different. Judge Harrison had clearly spent the recess consulting with legal precedents and child psychology experts. Officer Thompson and Zeus remained in the hallway. Dr. Reed had determined that Lily's breakthrough had been complete, and the presence of any dog, even a calm therapy animal, would only re-traumatize her now. "Before we proceed," Judge Harrison announced, "I want to inform all parties that during the recess, this court has been contacted by the Phoenix Police Department with information about search warrants being executed at properties associated with the defendants." Mitchell rose with barely contained excitement. "Your Honor, we have just received evidence that connects the defendants to illegal dog fighting operations and the specific training of attack animals for criminal purposes." Victoria Cross knew her case was lost, but professional obligation required her to fight until the end. "Your Honor, any evidence obtained during this recess is highly suspect in terms of timing, and could not have been properly processed in such a short time frame." But Judge Harrison had seen enough. "Ms. Cross, your client's co-defendant has requested to speak with prosecutors immediately about providing information relevant to these charges. I'm calling a recess until tomorrow morning to allow all parties to process these new developments." As the courtroom began to empty, Detective Santos received the call she'd been waiting for. "Detective, this is Officer Martinez at the Webb property search. You need to get down here immediately. We found the dog." "Alive? Barely?" "The animal is in critical condition. Appears to have been poisoned recently. We also found training equipment, medical records showing bite pattern documentation, and photographs that appear to show the dog being used in criminal activities." Santos closed her eyes, feeling a mixture of relief and horror. Webb had tried to eliminate the evidence by killing his own attack dog, but veterinary intervention might save the animal's life and provide the DNA evidence needed to connect it to the Thompson attack. The truth was finally exploding into the light. Marcus Webb's carefully constructed criminal enterprise was unraveling thread by thread, and Tony Rivera's conscience had delivered the final blow to their defense. Within 24 hours, what had seemed like an impossible case to prosecute had become an overwhelming demonstration of guilt. But the most important victory wasn't legal. It was personal. Little Lily Thompson had found her voice again, and, in doing so, she had not only identified her family's attackers, but had potentially saved countless other families from the same terrorizing ordeal. As the courthouse emptied and the media rushed to report on the day's shocking developments, one truth stood crystal clear. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the most powerful testimony, and justice had finally found its way through the darkness of a 3-year-old's nightmare. 6 months after the most dramatic courtroom testimony in Maricopa County history, the Arizona Republic ran a front-page story with the headline, "The Littlest Hero: How 3-year-old's Courage Changed Criminal Justice Forever." The accompanying photograph showed Lily Thompson, now 4 years old, laughing as she played fetch with Ranger, Officer Rick Thompson's retired therapy dog, in the sunshine of her family's backyard. The legal aftermath had been swift and decisive. Marcus Webb received the maximum sentence of 25 years for aggravated burglary, assault with a dangerous weapon, animal cruelty, and operating an illegal dog fighting operation. The judge had been particularly harsh in her sentencing, noting that Webb had weaponized an innocent animal to terrorize families and traumatize children. Tony Rivera, whose cooperation had been instrumental in uncovering the full scope of the criminal enterprise, received 15 years, but would be eligible for parole in 7 with good behavior. The case had ripple effects throughout the criminal justice system. Based on evidence uncovered during the Webb investigation, police had dismantled an entire network of illegal dog fighting operations across 3 counties. 12 additional suspects were arrested, and over 30 abused animals were rescued and rehabilitated. The investigation revealed that Webb's operation had been far more extensive than anyone had initially realized. He had been training attack dogs for other criminal enterprises, selling them to gang members, and running a sophisticated network that generated hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. District Attorney James Mitchell found himself fielding calls from prosecutors across the country who wanted to understand how his team had successfully prosecuted a case using the testimony of such a young witness. The key wasn't legal innovation, Mitchell explained during a conference presentation to the National District Attorneys Association. It was recognizing that children, even very young children, can be credible witnesses when provided with appropriate support and when their testimony aligns with physical evidence. The case had also transformed police procedures. The Phoenix Police Department had established the Lily Protocol, a comprehensive program for handling cases involving child witnesses of violent crimes. The protocol included specialized training for officers, partnerships with child psychologists, and the expanded use of therapy animals in both investigation and courtroom settings. Dr. Amanda Reed had become something of a celebrity in child psychology circles, publishing papers about trauma recovery and testifying before state legislative committees about the importance of victim-centered approaches to criminal justice. Her work with Lily had continued long after the trial, helping the little girl process not just her traumatic memories, but also the intense public attention that had followed her courtroom testimony. Lily's recovery has been remarkable, Dr. Reed explained during an interview with 60 Minutes. Children are incredibly resilient when given proper support. The key was helping her understand that she was safe, that the bad people were in jail, and that speaking the truth had helped protect other families. The Thompson family had faced their own challenges in the months following the trial. Dr. Michael Thompson had returned to his cardiology practice but found himself volunteering with victims' rights organizations in his spare time. Dr. Sarah Thompson had become an advocate for improved security in residential neighborhoods and had worked with the city council to enhance police patrols in areas targeted by home invasion crews. But it was Lily's transformation that had been the most remarkable. The shy, traumatized little girl who had hidden under her bed in terror had blossomed into a confident 4-year-old who loved school, played soccer with enthusiasm, and had developed a special bond with therapy animals. Her parents had been amazed to watch her overcome not just the trauma of the home invasion, but also the anxiety that had followed her sudden fame. The media attention had been overwhelming initially. National news programs, talk shows, and documentary filmmakers had all sought interviews with the family. The Thompsons had carefully limited their daughter's exposure, declining most requests and insisting that any interviews focus on the positive aspects of recovery rather than the details of the crime. Officer Rick Thompson and Ranger had become fixtures in the Courthouse Victim Services Program. The retired Golden Retriever had worked with dozens of child witnesses, providing comfort during difficult testimony and helping traumatized children find their voices. The success of the program had led to similar initiatives in courthouses across Arizona and in other states. Ranger seems to understand exactly what these kids need, Officer Thompson explained while watching the dog work with a 6-year-old witness in another case. He's patient, gentle, and somehow knows when to just be present versus when to provide more active comfort. It's like he was born for this work. Perhaps the most unexpected development had been the fate of Brutus, Webb's attack dog. The Rottweiler had survived the poisoning attempt, though with permanent health issues that ended any possibility of him being used for violence again. After months of rehabilitation and behavioral training, Brutus had been adopted by a family experienced in working with rescue animals. The transformation from attack dog to beloved family pet had become a symbol of redemption and the possibility of healing even the most damaged beings. The broader impact on the Phoenix community had been significant. Home invasion crimes in upscale neighborhoods had dropped by 60% following the arrests and convictions. The dismantling of the dog fighting network had eliminated a source. OF trained attack animals for criminal enterprises. Property values in previously targeted neighborhoods had rebounded as residents regained confidence in their safety. But beyond the statistics and legal precedents, the case had reminded everyone involved about the power of courage, regardless of age. Lily Thompson's willingness to speak the truth, despite her fear and trauma, had not only brought justice for her family but had protected countless other potential victims. On the first anniversary of her courtroom testimony, Lily was playing in her backyard when a reporter asked her if she remembered being scared of the bad doggy. The 4-year-old looked up from her sandbox, considered the question seriously, and then smiled with the wisdom of someone far beyond her years. "I was scared," she said simply. "But Daddy says when bad people hurt families, good people have to tell the truth so police can catch them. I told the truth, and now the bad man can't hurt anybody else's daddy." As she returned to her play, building sandcastles with the same determination she had shown in facing her nightmares, it was clear that sometimes the most powerful voices belong to the smallest among us, and that courage can bloom in the most unexpected places, changing the world one truth at a time.